Hi, I'm Chandra. On the day I was supposed to feel most loved, my sister leaned in, smiled like a snake, and said, "If you don't dance tango tonight, you'll hand over the $34 million mansion." Then she laughed, right in front of Nathaniel, in front of 400 guests. And my own parents? They didn't stop her. They smirked. They spat. They called me a clown. But what none of them saw coming was how this wedding would end. What made her face turn white. What shut every last mouth in that ballroom. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you listening from? Because I promise you, this isn't just a wedding story. It's a war. And I didn't start it. But I ended it. I always thought my wedding morning would feel warm. Instead, as I stood in the dressing suite with the sun pouring through the tall windows, a thin pressure settled beneath my ribs. It wasn't fear of getting married. It was the familiar weight that showed up whenever my family was near. A quiet reminder that joy, for me, never came without someone trying to stain it. I kept adjusting the simple pearl earrings my father gave me years ago. Avery Vale had been a complicated man, but he loved me in a steady way no one else in my family ever tried to match. I remembered our last conversation, his voice softer than usual, telling me that people try to shrink what they can't control. I didn't know what he meant then. I do now. The suite door swung open without a knock. Marcia stepped in, already wearing that impatient look she carried into every room. She scanned me from head to toe as if she were checking a product for defects. "Really, Chandra? That bouquet? It looks like a grocery store arrangement." I kept my voice calm. "It's the one I wanted." She moved closer, tugged lightly at the waist of my dress. "This is too loose." "Didn't you get it fitted? And why is the seating chart such a mess? I had to fix half of it this morning." I breathed once, slow. I stayed up until 2, finalizing it. "Well, it didn't help," she replied, lifting her chin as if she'd just delivered a fact everyone but me already knew. Before I could respond, the door opened again. Carla stepped inside with that smooth, satisfied stride of hers. She always carried herself like she owned the room, even when she walked into someone else's life. She glanced around, then at me, her smile thin and bright, like something drawn with a knife. "Morning, bride," she said. "You look nervous. Did Nathaniel figure you out yet?" "Figure me out how?" I asked, though I already knew she enjoyed creating confusion before striking. She tapped a finger on her phone, not looking up. "Oh, sometimes men catch on late." A pulse of heat pressed against my temples, but I didn't give her anything. I learned long ago that reacting only fed her. The wedding planner knocked lightly before peeking in. "Chandra, they put the welcome board up. Early. Thought you might want to see it before guests crowd around." I nodded and followed her out. The hallway smelled like fresh lilies, and the chatter from downstairs floated up in soft waves. I let myself hope, just for a moment, that maybe today would be different. Then I reached the welcome board. My stomach tightened. On the printed seating list, designed with gold trim, the kind meant to look elegant at high-end events, my name wasn't there. Not under family, not under bridal party, not anywhere. Instead, next to my assigned seat number, someone had printed "support staff." I stared at it, unable to speak. Marcia arrived a moment later, pretending to frown at the board. "Oh no, did they forget your name? That's strange." Carla stepped beside her. "Maybe it's where you belong. You've always been the helper around here." Her tone was light, almost playful, the way someone might tease a child who didn't catch the joke. I swallowed and tried to stay steady. Guests were arriving. People were walking in smiling, pointing at the decorations. I couldn't allow a scene. It would follow me for years, and they knew that. That was the trap. So, I pulled the planner aside and asked for a marker. I wrote my name in small, neat letters under the correct table number. My hand shook only once. While I worked, a part of me whispered, "Don't let them win today, not today." I turned away to head back to the suite, but before I reached the stairs, a coordinator approached me holding a tray of chilled champagne flutes. "Here you go," she said warmly. "They told me you'd help serve before the ceremony. Bridal request." For a moment, I couldn't even form words. My wedding gown brushed against the edge of the tray, shimmering under the lights. My makeup was untouched, my veil pinned perfectly. And someone wanted me to serve guests like staff at my own wedding. "Who told you that?" I asked. "The two women from your side. They said you offered." She gave me an apologetic shrug. "If it's too much, I can ask someone else." I looked toward the entrance. Guests were stepping inside in clusters. Some had already noticed me holding the tray. A few wore puzzled expressions. One woman whispered something to her partner, and he frowned in my direction. Shame crawled up my spine, but I held the tray anyway. I couldn't let strangers see the cracks in my family. If they did, the story wouldn't be that my sister and stepmother disrespected me. It would be that the bride caused chaos. So I carried the tray, keeping my shoulders straight. As I moved through the reception space, I started paying attention in a different way. Who glanced at me and then looked away fast? Who stared with open confusion? Who smiled too quickly, pretending they understood something they didn't? I didn't know it then, but this was the beginning of my shift, observing instead of absorbing. A man near the entry murmured, "Isn't that the bride?" Another whispered, "Maybe she's doing some kind of welcome gesture." I kept walking, each step heavier than the last. My father's words came back to me with an edge I hadn't heard before. People fear what they cannot control. Maybe that was why Carla kept trying to shrink me. The sound of laughter floated from the far side of the room. When I lifted my eyes, I saw the photo display of the estate, my father's estate, the $34 million mansion he left behind. The one Carla always acted as if she'd built with her bare hands. She stood next to the display now, bent slightly toward another woman, pointing directly at me. They both laughed like I was part of some private joke. The tray in my hands dipped before I steadied it. My throat felt tight, but not from tears, from something colder, sharper. A line had been crossed, and I felt it down to my bones. If my father were still alive, this would never happen. But he wasn't. And if I didn't do something, this wouldn't be the last time they tried to cut me down. I adjusted the tray in my hands and stepped fully into the reception hall, willing my face to stay composed even as every nerve in my body screamed to run. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, heads turned, and then, like someone had turned down the volume on the entire room, silence settled in, thick and expectant. "Chandra?" a familiar voice called gently. It was Sylvia, Nathaniel's aunt. She walked toward me, her expression tight with concern, brows furrowed. She wore soft lilac and pearls, the same warm woman who'd once told me I reminded her of her sister. But now she looked me over with a question in her eyes that stung more than any insult. "Honey, why are you working?" I couldn't speak right away. My throat tightened. I tried to force a smile, but my lips barely cooperated. Every pair of eyes in the room suddenly felt glued to me. "Oh," I said with a lightness that didn't reach my chest. "Just helping out while we wait." Sylvia frowned deeper, her mouth parting like she didn't believe me, but didn't want to push. "But you're the bride." A little boy I didn't recognize tugged at the tulle of my gown, wide-eyed. "Are you serving drinks like a waitress?" I knelt slightly, trying to keep the tray from spilling. "Just for a minute," I told him gently, though I could feel the shame burning behind my ears. I stood again, head high, heart pounding. But then, there he was. Nathaniel. He had just stepped inside from the garden. His eyes found mine immediately, widening with alarm as he took in the tray in my hands, the whispers beginning to ripple behind me, and the stiff silence hovering like fog. He moved toward me, but Carla moved faster. I watched her snake her hand through his arm, stopping him halfway. She leaned in, whispered something I couldn't hear, and he paused. He didn't brush her off. He didn't rush to me. He hesitated. That moment didn't just sting. It split something open in me. I didn't need to know what she said. The fact that she could interrupt his instinct to come to me on our wedding day. It said everything. She always had a way of inserting herself, of making things look like they revolved around her. And now she was doing it again with my fiancé. Then she turned to the room, voice loud enough for every table to hear. "Chandra insisted on helping the staff," she announced with a laugh. "She's been so anxious all morning. I told her she didn't need to, but you know her, always trying too hard." There was a beat, then a ripple of polite chuckles. Not because it was funny, but because it sounded like concern, like kindness, like she was defending me somehow. I stood frozen, heart thudding like a drum. "She just wanted to feel useful," Marcia chimed in from near the archway, clutching a mimosa. "You know how she gets. She gets overwhelmed." The words slid over the room like smoke, thick, hard to clear. I saw heads nodding, whispers, starting again. Their faces shifted, from surprise to sympathy to something far worse, agreement. I felt like the floor might disappear under me, overwhelmed, needy. I had spent my entire adult life proving I was capable, stable, in control, and in one breath, they painted me as fragile. I tried to speak. "That's not—" My voice cracked. It cracked. And that was all Carla needed. She looked at me like a mother indulging a tantrum. "See? She just needs some space. Let's give her a moment." Another wave of nods. Some guests glanced away uncomfortably. Others gave me those half-hearted pity smiles, the kind people use when they've already made up their minds. Nathaniel finally broke away from Carla and came to me. "Is this true?" he asked, voice low. "Did you want to help?" It wasn't anger I heard. It was confusion, concern. But worse, it was doubt. Not in who I was, but in who he thought I was. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. I looked at him, and for a second, I hated the question more than anything else that had happened, because it meant that even he, the one person I thought saw me clearly, wasn't sure anymore. "No," I said, steadying my breath. "That's not what happened." My voice trembled, but the words were firm. Carla was beside us again, that same syrupy smile plastered on her lips. "She's just overwhelmed. Really, it's not a big deal. Let's just get her seated." She said it like I was a child being shuffled to nap time. I looked around. They were believing her. Some nodded, some looked away, some leaned into the convenient lie because it was easier than confronting the discomfort of the truth. I couldn't explain everything in that moment. Even if I tried, I knew how it would look. So I turned. I walked down a side hallway, away from the crowd, into a dim corridor lined with storage tables and votive candles waiting to be set. My steps were slow. My body felt like it was made of stone. I stopped in front of a full-length mirror and stared. Not at the gown, not at the makeup, but at my eyes. I'd seen that expression before, when I was 12 and Marcia accidentally threw away the science fair project I spent weeks on. When Carla told my father I couldn't handle the family business and he should spare me the pressure. When my mother told me, quietly, in the kitchen one night, "You've always been more sensitive than the others. It's just how you were made." They humiliated me, then convinced everyone else I was fragile. And I had let them. I touched the corner of my eye, not to fix my mascara, but to feel the strength gathering behind it. I wasn't going to lose today, not to them. The wedding didn't have to become a war zone, but that didn't mean I'd stay silent. Not anymore. This wasn't about a tray or a seating chart. It was about a lifetime of being told who I was and what I wasn't allowed to be. And something inside me finally snapped into focus. I wiped the tear that had started to fall, took a breath, and walked back into that room with the weight of a woman who was no longer going to play along. I didn't make a scene. I didn't scream or accuse. I simply walked to the nearest table, set the tray down with care, and stood tall. My shoulders squared, my chin lifted. And just for a moment, the noise in the room changed. People noticed. Carla, across the floor, blinked, just once, but it was enough. The faintest crack in her confidence. I didn't know that Carla had already prepared her next move, one designed to push me past the point of no return. I barely had time to gather myself when a quick shuffle of steps approached from my right. A young man, no older than 25, dressed in black slacks and a crisp white shirt, hurried over with something clutched in his hands. "Miss Vale," he said, slightly out of breath. "I was told to give you this immediately." I took the envelope from him before he could say more. Cream-colored, my name written on the front in familiar cursive. That perfect, loopy handwriting that used to label Christmas presents I never wanted. Carla. He offered a tight-lipped, uncomfortable smile and retreated quickly as if he knew something he shouldn't have. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. I stepped away from the foot traffic and into a quiet alcove near the entrance, close enough to hear the soft buzz of voices in the hall, but far enough for privacy. I held the envelope for a second. Part of me hoped it was nothing. Maybe just a misplaced thank you card. Maybe some ridiculous prank meant to rattle me a little and get a laugh later. But I knew better. When I opened it, the first thing I saw was a printed seating chart. Not the one we approved and sent to the coordinator. This one had changes, subtle but surgical. I looked for my name. It wasn't next to Nathaniel. It wasn't at the head table either. It was at a small round table marked Family Overflow, Left Terrace. A bride, at the overflow table, and at the bottom, scribbled in that same handwriting, were the words, "Just wanted you to see what you'd be sitting with if anything goes wrong today. Hearts, Carla." My chest tightened, not from shock, but from the pattern. This wasn't new. When I was 12 and won first place in a regional essay contest, Carla told the whole family it was a team effort. She hadn't read a word of it. When I got into Tulane, she said it was because my counselor felt sorry for me. And when Nathaniel proposed, she told my mother over brunch, "Chandra's always been better at appearing composed than actually being it." This was Carla's art, undermining under the guise of amusement. And now she was staging it like theater, minutes before my vows. I clutched the chart, my fingers digging into the corners. "Chandra," a voice whispered. I turned and saw Lydia, Nathaniel's cousin, standing just behind one of the floral columns. She looked hesitant, glancing around before stepping toward me. "I don't want to get in the middle of anything," she said carefully, "but I think you should know what Carla's been saying." I didn't move. I just nodded. "She's been talking to some of the guests, mentioning that you've been under a lot of stress, that you might have an episode today." An episode. My throat tightened. "She said you've been anxious, overwhelmed, and that if something goes sideways, people should be patient with you." Lydia's eyes darted around again. "And she mentioned that you shouldn't be given anything complicated, especially not legal documents." My heart stuttered. Legal documents? What the hell was she setting up? I stared at the chart in my hand, then back at Lydia. Did she say anything else? She just kept saying how worried she was about you, how she hoped everything went smoothly because, fragile people need stability. Lydia grimaced. "She made it sound sweet, but—" I finished her sentence. "It wasn't." "No," she agreed. I thanked her, gently placed the seating chart back into the envelope, and tucked it into my clutch. My head was pounding, not from anger, not yet, but from the sheer volume of planning it must have taken to orchestrate all this. She wasn't improvising. This had been weeks, months in the making. I walked slowly back into the corridor, the sound of my heels clicking softly on the marble. The ceremony was minutes away. Guests were already beginning to take their seats. Nathaniel's parents were at the front, chatting with the pastor. My mother sat stiffly beside my father's framed photo at the family table. None of them looked in my direction. I breathed in, long and slow. Carla was prepping the audience, setting the stage, planting seeds. If I stumbled, if I cried, if I simply reacted like a normal human being, she had already arranged for people to question my stability. That way, if I spoke the truth later, it wouldn't matter. It would sound like the ravings of someone too delicate to handle pressure. I stood near the double doors, trying to decide whether to confront her or stay silent. If I called her out now, I'd play right into her hands. I'd become the spectacle she was baiting. But if I said nothing, I remembered something my father once told me. You don't fight people like Carla in the open. You fight them by surviving where they hoped you'd break. So I stood taller, wiped the corner of my eyes, fixed my posture. I turned just in time to see Carla approaching, her heels making a soft, deliberate rhythm on the stone floor. She wore a pale gray dress, fitted and sharp, like her. She smiled. "Everything all right, darling?" Her tone could have passed for concern if I didn't know better. But I did. "Perfect," I said. And for a breath, just one breath, her expression faltered. Her eyes scanned my face, looking for cracks. But I gave her nothing. Let her wonder. Let her wait. I turned away before she could read anything else on my face, pushing a breath through my chest as I moved toward the ceremony doors. I wasn't sure what came next, but I could feel it, the air shifting, carrying something thick and unpleasant, like a storm that hadn't broken yet. I didn't take more than 3 steps before a staff member approached. He slowed as he neared me, uncertain, almost apologetic. His hands were tight around a clipboard. "Miss Vale, someone told me you needed this urgently." I stopped, not because of his words, but because something in his expression told me this wasn't a simple request. He held the clipboard out as if it might burn him. I took it. A contract was clipped on top. My breath hitched the moment my eyes landed on the title, Property Transfer Agreement. The address printed below was one I knew by heart, my father's old estate, the house she'd circled for years, with the hunger of someone who believed the world had wronged her. My throat tightened. I shifted the pages, scanning the text. There were notes in the margins, her handwriting again, clean, practiced loops, corrections, underlines, little arrows pointing to the signature line, as if I might miss it on a wedding day. The staff member cleared his throat. "She said you wanted to review it before the ceremony." I didn't have to ask which she. I looked past him and saw Carla across the hall, speaking with a guest but watching me at the corner of her eye. That faint smile, like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. I whispered, "Who handed this to you?" He hesitated. "Your sister." "Of course." I flipped through the document, my pulse climbing higher with each line. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This was a trap laid with precision. She knew I wouldn't want a scene. She knew the pressure would be crushing. And if I signed something without looking, not unusual for wedding day chaos, she'd walk away with everything she's wanted for years. Footsteps approached behind me. "Well," Carla said lightly, "you always sign things without reading them anyway." The humiliation hit fast and sharp. My skin burned. Before I could breathe, Nathaniel reached us, trying to understand what he was looking at. But Carla stepped in front of him with practiced ease. Nothing for you to worry about, she said brightly. Just family business. Her voice carried farther than she pretended it would. Guests turned. Whispers rippled through the room. I heard someone murmur, "She seems overwhelmed." Marcia appeared beside her like a shadow. "We're helping her stay calm," she told Nathaniel, handing him another sheet. "You know how she gets. You know how she gets." The phrase dropped into my chest like a stone. They were building a story, one they'd rehearsed. My palms felt damp around the clipboard. My wedding gown felt too heavy. My vision pulsed at the edges, not from tears, but from clarity. They weren't improvising, they were executing. "Chandra," someone said softly from behind us. An older woman, a guest. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" Her pity stabbed deeper than the cruelty. I forced my voice steady. "I'm fine." Carla laughed, as if amused by my attempt to defend myself. "Don't push yourself," she said. "No one wants a meltdown today." Another whisper floated from nearby. "Poor thing." The edges of the room tilted slightly. Not enough to fall, but enough to remind me how close I was to breaking if I didn't plant my feet. Then something inside me shifted, small but unignorable. A spark. A line drawn quietly in the dust. Not this time. I handed the clipboard back to the staff member. My fingers didn't shake. My voice didn't waver. "No." Nathaniel heard the firmness and moved to my side. "What's going on?" I looked at him, then at the crowd, then back at the two women who had followed me through every chapter of my life, like shadows that grew darker with every year. "I'm not signing anything today," I said. "And if anyone hands me another document with my name on it, it ends right there." Marcia's smile stiffened. My mother shifted in her seat. Carla blinked once, slowly, like she was recalibrating. "Sweetheart," she said quietly, stepping closer. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." I lifted my chin. "That depends on who you think you're dealing with." A hush spread across the hall. Guests paused mid-conversation. Someone near the aisle murmured, "She's finally standing up for herself." For the first time all day, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel lost. I felt grounded, like my feet had finally found solid earth. Carla's expression changed. Only a little, but enough for me to catch it, the moment she realized her script wasn't working. And maybe that scared her, because she leaned in, her perfume sharp and cold in the air, and whispered something just for me. Something designed to strike straight at the one place she knew I wasn't armored. Carla leaned in as if she were fixing a stray strand of my hair. Her hand grazed the side of my face with all the softness of a sister's love, but her breath at my ear carried words that felt like ice. "If you don't sign, sweetheart," she whispered, "I'll tell Nathaniel what your mother told me about your past episodes." My body stiffened. The weight of that one word, episodes, pulled me under. It wasn't the first time she used it, not the first time someone in my family had tried to wrap normal emotions in clinical language. I wasn't unstable. I wasn't broken. I was a girl who grieved her father, a teenager who withdrew after too many cold silences at home, a woman who had learned, painfully, that tears in front of Carla were never safe. Still, in that moment, I couldn't breathe. I stepped back without a word, turning away from her. My chest was so tight, it felt like my ribs might snap. I didn't know where I was walking to. I just knew I needed distance. The first door I reached was cracked open. A small preparation room just off the hallway, usually meant for last-minute makeup touch-ups or emergency sewing kits. I slipped inside and shut the door behind me. Finally alone. The air in there was still, but it did nothing to calm me. I braced myself against the marble counter, the coldness of it grounding me just enough to keep standing. What if Nathaniel believed her? What if he'd already started to? What if every whisper Carla had planted today, about my nerves, about my emotions, had already taken root in his mind? The idea that he might see me through their lens instead of his own. It broke something loose in me. I stared at myself in the mirror, the veil still perfectly pinned, lipstick untouched, but my eyes were red and wild. I gripped the edge of the counter tighter. I'd spent so many years convincing myself I was steady, smart, measured. But Carla's lie hit the nerve I had never fully healed, the voice that still asked, late at night, "What if they're right about you?" A soft knock startled me. Then the door creaked open just enough to reveal my mother's face. Danita. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "You shouldn't isolate yourself like this," she said. Her tone wasn't warm, not cold either, just flat, practiced. "People are starting to notice." I didn't answer. She walked closer and held something out to me, a folded piece of paper. "I think you should take care of this before the ceremony. Fix it quickly and stop making everyone nervous." Her words sliced right through me. She didn't ask if I was okay, didn't ask why I looked like I was about to fall apart. She just handed me a piece of paper like it was a forgotten receipt. Then she turned and left. I opened it slowly, hands trembling. It wasn't a note, not anything comforting. It was a photocopy of an old intake form, a counseling session I'd gone to after Dad passed away. I remembered that appointment vividly. I'd been 19, shaken by grief, just needing someone to talk to. But scrawled in red ink at the top of the page was a handwritten note. History of emotional instability. I didn't write that. I would never write that. But I recognized the handwriting. Carla's. My stomach flipped, my knees buckled, and I sank onto the love seat near the window. This wasn't just a violation, it was a setup. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to disqualify me. From property, from decision-making, from my own story. If this got passed around, if guests believed it, if Nathaniel saw it, it could become the new truth. Not reality. Not who I was. Just a convenient fiction handed out by a family who didn't want to lose control. I clutched the paper so tightly it creased in my palm. I wanted to scream, cry, fight, run. And in that moment, I didn't know which one would come first. Part of me wanted to walk out the back door. Let them finish the wedding without a bride. Let them spin their stories. I was tired of living inside the fog they created, tired of defending myself from shadows. Tears blurred my vision. I'd held myself together for so long, for Nathaniel, for what I thought family was supposed to mean. But every piece of this day felt like a coordinated attack. The forged contract, the whispers, the seating chart, the mental health record, twisted, rewritten, weaponized. I was losing faith in everything, even in myself. I stared at the paper, and then, by accident, my fingers brushed the edge of something tucked behind it. I pulled it free, a small note card. Old, yellowed at the edges. My name written across the front in my father's handwriting. I knew it the second I saw it. It had been tucked inside a birthday card when I was 17. I'd saved it all these years, moving it from drawer to drawer, never able to throw it out. I unfolded it slowly. One line stood out. "You always see clearly when others don't. Never let someone else define your truth." I read it again and again. The noise in my head dulled, just a little. The chaos dimmed, my chest loosened. I wasn't broken, I wasn't fragile, I was tired, and I was being hunted in a way that didn't look like hunting, but control, discredit, shame. My father had seen me, fully, before the lies had taken over. Nathaniel loved me, not perfectly, but truthfully, and I knew who I was. I just needed to remember it louder than they shouted their version of me. I wiped my eyes. Not strong yet, but something close to it. Something starting. I folded the fake medical note and the real birthday card together, slipped them into the pocket hidden in the lining of my dress. And just as I stood, ready to face the storm one more time, the door opened again. Nathaniel. And his voice didn't sound like his own. Not the man who teased me when I overcooked pasta. Not the man who held my hand during thunderstorms. This voice was flatter, guarded, careful in a way that felt rehearsed. "Nathaniel," I whispered. He stepped fully inside and closed the door behind him, the soft click sounding too final. His shoulders were tight, lips pressed together like he was holding something back. He wasn't angry. He wasn't cold either. He looked conflicted, torn between what he knew and what someone had convinced him to suspect. "Chandra," he said quietly, "we need to talk." The way he said my name made my stomach twist. I instinctively hid the paper in my hand against my skirt, but he'd already caught sight of it. He moved closer and sank to a knee in front of me, trying to catch my eyes. "Carla told me you might struggle today," he said, voice so calm it scared me. "She said things might get overwhelming for you." Every syllable stung, not because he believed her completely, but because he considered believing her at all. "She told you that?" I asked, barely able to get the words out. He exhaled slowly. "She said you've been under pressure, that sometimes you shut down when it's too much. She said she just wanted me to be prepared." Prepared. She was using the quiet moments between us, the late nights when I cried about missing my father, the mornings when I was exhausted from planning, to build a false version of me. She'd taken the most tender parts of our relationship and twisted them. I held out the paper. "This isn't real. Someone added to it." Nathaniel's brow furrowed. He reached for the sheet, studying the red handwriting. His thumb brushed the ink. He knew my handwriting. He'd seen it in love notes, grocery lists, the sticky notes I left in his briefcase before work. "This doesn't look like yours," he murmured. I felt something inside me soften, but only a little. "Why would she show this to you?" I asked. He swallowed hard. He didn't want to say it, but he did. "She said you might have an episode before the ceremony. She said your family's worried." My chest tightened. "She's not worried. She's trying to destroy this day." My voice cracked despite my best effort. "Destroy us." That was the moment the dam broke. Not with sobbing, not the dramatic collapse Carla probably hoped for. Just a single breath shuddering out of me, heavy with exhaustion. Nathaniel immediately reached for me, pulled me against him, and for a moment, just a moment, the room steadied. His heartbeat was steady against my cheek, and I let myself lean into him, even though the betrayal lingered in the air between us. He kissed the side of my head. "I should have come to you first. I didn't know what to think." I eased back, wiping under my eyes with the back of my hand. My voice steadied. "I need you to trust me, not her." Before he could answer, the door swung open. Marcia stood in the doorway, holding up her phone like she'd caught us in some scandal. "Oh, good," she said loudly. "You two finally addressing her little episode." "What are you doing?" Nathaniel snapped, stepping in front of me. She ignored him, raised the phone higher. "People should know what's really going on. We're just trying to help her." Behind her, two guests peered in, whispering to each other. Someone else lifted a phone. My pulse kicked hard. They wanted footage. Me crying, me shaking, me arguing. Proof of instability. Proof I couldn't manage myself, let alone a property. Proof I wasn't fit to make decisions. Proof I wasn't fit to marry him. I stood, slow, controlled. "Marcia," I said, "put the phone down." She smirked. "Everyone's worried. Don't make this worse." Nathaniel's voice hardened. "She said stop. Turn it off." But she didn't. If anything, she stepped farther into the room. More people appeared behind her, drawn by the commotion like they'd been waiting for it. Carla had orchestrated this. Every whisper, every document, every concerned tone. Now, a small crowd at the door, phones ready, expecting a meltdown. I squared my shoulders. "If you don't leave," I said quietly, "I'll consider this harassment and defamation, and I will handle it legally." Her smile faltered. She had always relied on the fact that I stayed quiet, that I never pushed back. She didn't know what to do with a version of me that didn't shrink. Nathaniel stepped closer to me. "You heard her. Get out." The guests behind Marcia stepped back. Phones lowered, eyes widened. The spell of their little performance broke like a snapped wire. Marcia's face twisted, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. She finally turned, shoulders stiff, and walked out. The others scattered with her. I felt the shift instantly. For the first time all day, the narrative slipped from their hands. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one shrinking. But cornered animals lash out, and Carla had never been one to lose quietly. Nathaniel squeezed my hand. "We should get out of this room. People are staring." I nodded, taking a moment to steady my breathing before opening the door. The hallway was quieter now, the earlier cluster of spectators dissolving back into the crowd. I stepped forward, the train of my dress brushing softly against the carpet, and made my way toward the main hall. That's when I saw her, Carla, standing at the far end of the corridor, waiting, not hiding, not pretending, waiting. And in her hand was something new, something she held like a finishing blow. I slowed my steps without meaning to, my pulse tight and uneven. Nathaniel stayed close beside me, but even he could feel the shift in the air. It was the kind of stillness you get before a storm hits the coast. Quiet, heavy, impossible to ignore. Carla didn't move at first. She stood in the center of the hallway, as if she were the one being honored today, not me. Her posture straight, chin slightly raised, confidence radiating off her like perfume. She tapped a glossy envelope against her palm, watching me with a gaze that said she'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Well," she murmured, "I suppose you're done pretending." Her voice was warm enough to fool a stranger, but I caught the steel underneath. Nathaniel took half a step forward, a protective instinct, but she didn't even glance at him. Her eyes were on me alone, like this was a private duel in a public place. "What is that?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "A wedding surprise." She handed me the envelope the way a doctor might hand over a terminal diagnosis. "I plan to give it to you later, but since you're being difficult today, I think now is better." I opened it, expecting another petty jab, but what slid out made my stomach clench. Pages, printed emails, my emails, therapy messages from after my father died, private moments of grief I'd written in the middle of sleepless nights, thinking they were safe. But these weren't untouched. Lines were cut, rewritten, shortened, everything stripped of context. One message read, "I feel like I'm falling apart." Another, "I don't know how to make people like me." Pieces of mourning twisted into a portrait of instability. Nathaniel snatched the stack from my hands. "Where did you get these?" Carla smiled as if she were discussing table linens. "From someone who cares about this family's reputation." "Reputation?" Nathaniel's voice sharpened. "You invaded her privacy." "I preserved our future," she corrected. "If she has a breakdown during the ceremony, people will blame all of us." The corridor tilted for a moment. Not physically, emotionally. The level of calculation was dizzying. This wasn't sabotage anymore. This was scorched earth. She wasn't trying to embarrass me. She was trying to erase me. Nathaniel wrapped an arm around me, pulling me in close. He whispered, "Don't look at her. She's trying to get a reaction." But I did look at her, and something inside me finally settled instead of trembling. "No," I said quietly. "You don't get to control me anymore." Her smile twitched. Just a hair. Enough to show she didn't expect calm. She expected tears or panic, something she could feed the crowd. Nathaniel stepped forward. "Leave us alone." And that's when she snapped. "She's not stable enough for marriage," she shouted, loud enough to echo down the hallway. Heads turned at once. "She's having an episode. Look at her." Phones lifted again. Guests peeked into the hall. Murmurs rose like buzzing insects. I could feel every eye on me, hungry for a story. Carla lifted the stack of edited emails. "I have proof she shouldn't be making legal decisions today. She needs help, not a wedding." Nathaniel swore under his breath. "This is insane." But I didn't move, didn't cry, didn't raise my voice. I stepped forward, chin steady. "You're projecting," I said softly. The hallway went still. Even Nathaniel froze. Her eyes hardened. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. You're projecting so loudly the entire building can hear it." A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. People glanced between us, suddenly unsure who the unstable one really was. Then she made her biggest mistake. She stepped toward me, fury in her face, and hissed, "You think I'm going to let you take everything that should have been mine? That house was meant for me. Dad promised it to me." The entire hallway went silent. So silent I heard someone gasp near the staircase. She realized too late what she'd said. Out loud, in front of witnesses, greed, jealousy, motive. It all spilled out in one slip. Nathaniel's eyebrows shot up. "That's what this is about? Money?" My mother's face drained of color. Even Marcia went rigid. Carla tried to recover. I didn't mean..." But she did, and everyone heard it. For a heartbeat, no one moved. I could feel the shift, the crack in her confidence, the first real sign she understood she'd gone too far. And in her eyes, fear flickered. Just briefly. I didn't step toward her. I didn't need to. All I said was, "Now everyone sees the truth." She opened her mouth to respond. But before she could, a scream pierced the hall from the direction of the ceremony room. Guests jerked their heads. Nathaniel grabbed my hand. Carla froze. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And whatever waited beyond those doors was about to change everything again. The scream echoed like glass shattering inside my chest. I froze in place. Every instinct screamed at me to move, but my body wouldn't listen until the second scream came. Sharper, higher-pitched, frantic. The sound of panic, not pain. That jolted me back to life. Nathaniel grabbed my hand and we moved. Not just walked, ran. The hallway blurred as guests parted, startled by the noise, curiosity drawing them closer to the double doors of the main ballroom. I braced myself as we pushed through. The air inside felt heavier, like something had ruptured. There were too many people standing, scattered instead of seated. Murmurs filled the space like a rising tide. I heard crying, the buzz of phones recording, and over it all, a voice I hadn't heard in years. My aunt's, sobbing. Then I saw her. My mother was on the ground, leaning on one elbow, the other hand pressed to her temple. Aunt Doreen knelt beside her, dabbing at a cut with tissues. And 5 feet away, Carla stood still, shoulders tense, fists clenched, face pale and unreadable. Someone whispered, "She pushed her." "No, I think she just screamed." "I saw it happen. She grabbed her." "Did she faint?" It was a storm of confusion and judgment, and Carla stood right in the eye of it. Then, like clockwork, she turned. Her finger extended straight at me. "She did it," she shouted. "She snapped. She pushed Mom." The room recoiled. For a split second, the guests hesitated. And then the whispers shifted, closer to me now. "Is that true?" "Wait, is this what Carla warned us about?" It was so obvious it almost felt absurd. But this was her last act. She hadn't gotten the breakdown she'd hoped for in the hallway, so she manufactured one here. Except this time, it was too much. I stepped forward, steady. I didn't blink. "Nathaniel," I said quietly, "stay with me." He moved beside me immediately, his hand warm in mine. We approached the center of the room, and I knelt beside my mother. "Are you okay?" I asked. She nodded weakly. "I tripped. Carla grabbed my arm." Before I could say another word, a voice spoke from near the back. "I saw the whole thing." A boy, no older than 19, stepped forward. I didn't recognize him, maybe a distant cousin's kid. "She didn't push her," he said, pointing at me. "Carla did. She was yelling. She grabbed her arm and she fell." The shift in the room was instant. Carla's face twitched. "You little liar." She lunged at him, but her fiancé caught her by the elbow just in time, pulling her back. "Carla, stop," he hissed. Gasps fluttered through the room like birds startled from a tree. I stood slowly. I wasn't angry. I was focused. "Everyone," I said, lifting my voice, not a shout, just enough to command attention. "Please, I have something to show you." Carla froze and her breath caught. She knew exactly what was coming. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope she'd given me earlier. I opened it and removed the stack of manipulated emails, the ones she'd edited to paint me as unstable. I held them up for the guests to see. Then I held up the forged medical note, the one she delivered through our mother, with the false annotation written in her handwriting. Finally, I pulled out my father's old birthday card, the one I'd found behind the forged note. His message still echoed in my chest. "You always see clearly when others don't. Never let someone else define your truth." I turned to face the room. "My sister," I began calmly, "has spent the past several months preparing to destroy me. She forged documents. She hacked my private emails. She used the grief I shared in therapy as a weapon, all to convince you and Nathaniel that I am too unstable to get married, too unstable to inherit my father's estate, too unstable to be trusted." A stunned silence filled the room. She's been trying to provoke a breakdown all day, but when I didn't give her one, she made her own. Nathaniel stepped forward. "She gave these to Chandra herself. I saw it, and I've read the originals. These aren't real. They're criminal." Carla's voice broke into a shout. "You can't prove anything." But I didn't respond, because someone else did. Marcia stepped forward from the crowd. She wasn't holding her phone up like earlier. This time she held it low, almost apologetic. "I have something," she said. Carla's head whipped around. "Don't you dare!" Marcia ignored her. "I thought I was helping you," she said to Carla. "But I didn't know you were going to say that." She tapped the screen. And suddenly, Carla's voice echoed from the tiny speakers, unmistakable. "You think I'm going to let you take everything that should have been mine? That house is worth millions. Dad promised it to me." The ballroom erupted, but not into chaos, into clarity. The last thread of Carla's defense snapped. She lunged toward Marcia again, wild-eyed, but her fiancé held her back. "You lied," he said, "to all of us." My mother, still on the floor, whispered, "Carla, what have you done?" No one touched her. No one defended her. The crowd that once leaned in to see me break was now watching her unravel. And then it was quiet. I stepped forward one last time, calm, still. "Carla," I said, meeting her eyes, "this ends today." Her lips parted, maybe to argue, maybe to beg, but nothing came out. I didn't scream, I didn't weep. I simply stood there, surrounded by people who finally saw the truth. Not because I forced them to, but because she revealed it herself. You tried to destroy my life to take something that never belonged to you, I said, and now everyone sees you for who you are. She didn't argue. She didn't move. And I walked away, not as a victim, not even as a bride, but as a woman no longer living, under someone else's shadow. As I reached the edge of the room, the doors behind me opened. A pair of uniformed police officers stepped inside, scanning the crowd. One of them walked toward me. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said. "We need to ask you a few questions." And just like that, I knew the story wasn't over yet. The police officer stepped closer. The ballroom hushed once again, the tension folding in like a breath no one dared exhale. "Ma'am," he said with calm professionalism, "we need a clear statement from you. There are conflicting reports about what happened when your mother fell." I nodded once. My spine straightened, and for the first time all day, I felt like I wasn't borrowing strength. I owned it. I told him everything, plain, straight. No dramatics, no embellishments. Just the truth, clean and sharp. The way it should have been from the start. Behind me, Carla's sobs were growing louder, more frantic. Her voice cracked as she tried to paint herself as the victim. Her fiancé had stepped away, arms crossed, jaw clenched. And the guests, the few that lingered, were no longer whispering. They were watching her, really watching her. The word passed from mouth to mouth like static in the air, manipulative. Later, I rode with my mother to the hospital. No major injuries, just a mild concussion, and, I suspected, an even deeper bruise to her ego. She barely spoke, just stared at her lap. In the sterile quiet of the hospital room, her voice finally came, low and uneven. "I didn't know she'd go this far," she said. I let this happen." I didn't say anything at first. I didn't need to. That single sentence felt heavier than years of silence between us. For her, it wasn't quite an apology, but it was the closest she'd ever come to saying, "I see you." That may be... I was right. About Carla. About everything. Nathaniel came by later, pulling up a chair beside me in the waiting room, while nurses checked on my mom. He didn't offer comfort. He didn't need to. He placed his hand gently on my shoulder and simply said, "Whatever comes next, you don't face it alone." I didn't need perfect. I didn't need some fairy tale wrapped in white lace. I just needed this, quiet, real, grounded love in the middle of a battlefield. Back at the venue, the decorations were still up, untouched. The arch we were supposed to stand under. The candles still flickering gently. The tables dressed in blush linens, untouched hors d'oeuvres still sitting out, going stale. The guests had mostly gone. My bouquet sat on the edge of a table, forgotten. Nathaniel asked gently, "Do you still want to do this tonight?" And I surprised even myself by saying no. Not because I was broken, not because she won, but because this night had been claimed by truth, and I wanted our vows to live in something purer, not in the wreckage. That decision felt right, quietly powerful. Later that evening, we got word. Carla's lawyer wanted to talk. I met them at the courthouse atrium. Cold light, echoing footsteps, that empty-chested stillness of a building too late in the day for justice, but still too early for peace. Carla was already there, sitting on a bench with slumped shoulders, and mascara streaked down her cheeks. She looked nothing like the woman who tapped an envelope against her palm with a smug smile this morning. She looked small and lost. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she murmured, eyes locked on the floor. I wanted something that felt like it was finally mine." I let the words hang between us for a moment. Then I said quietly, "You could have just asked for help, Carla, but you didn't. You tried to break me." She started crying harder, but I didn't move toward her. That part of me, the part that used to want to fix her, explain myself, win her love, it had gone quiet. Not cold, just done. Her lawyer spoke next, gentle and overly polite. We'd like to avoid further escalation. No charges, no lawsuits, a private civil agreement between family. I looked them straight in the eye. This wasn't a family misunderstanding. It was calculated, public, and criminal. Her attorney opened his mouth to speak again, but stopped. He saw it in my face. I wasn't here to negotiate my peace away. Carla finally whispered, "Will you ever forgive me?" I studied her face. "I don't hate you," I said, "but forgiveness isn't the same as inviting someone back into your life." She looked away. That answer told her everything she needed to know. We left the courthouse just after 10. The night had gone quiet, the humidity of the Charleston air finally breaking into something cool and clear. Nathaniel slipped his coat over my shoulders without a word. For the first time in decades, I breathed without bracing for impact. There was no dread, no anticipation of judgment waiting around the corner. Just air. Still, clean air. I hadn't screamed to win. I hadn't collapsed to be believed. I won by staying whole, by letting the truth do what I never could with pleading. When we got back to the house, I emptied my purse and saw the small, glossy card, an old tango invitation Carla had once tried to use to embarrass me. It was bent, smudged, almost meaningless now. I folded it once, then again, dropped it in the trash. Not as a rejection, as release. And as I turned off the last light and reached for my phone to set an alarm, it buzzed once in my hand. The name on the screen made my breath catch in my throat. A name I never thought I'd see again.